Join thousands of NFT traders who already start their day on CryptoSlam.
Will Algorand's state proofs lead the way to true decentralization?
And we have a very unique proof-of-stake consensus mechanism developed by Professor Silva, of course, through his verifiable random functions, VRF, and this whole concept of pure proof-of-stake that really solves that blockchain trilemma.
Are decentralized projects truly able to overcome the oversized influence of their developers? And what does Web 3.0 really mean for people like you and me? Coming up on Word on the Block, Jason Lee, COO of Algorand Foundation, joins us to dive deep into those topics and a whole lot more. Well, the world is banking on blockchains to transform our future. So how far are we from living our lives in the new digital age? And have the current blockchain decentralized projects been able to tackle the problem of single point of failure associated with centralized software and companies? That's a lot of technical jargon for what we're really trying to answer is how secure is our future in the hands of technology? And I'm super excited to welcome you to Word on the Block, the series that takes a deeper dive into blockchain and the emerging technologies that shape our world at the intersection of business, politics, and economy. It is what we cover right here on Forkast.News. I'm Editor-in-Chief Angie Lau. And today we are in conversation with Jason Lee, Chief Operating Officer of Algorand Foundation, that is working on enabling a decentralized, inclusive economy based on the Algorand blockchain. And thanks for joining us, Jason. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks, Angie. It's a pleasure to be here as well.
Well, first, when we talk about blockchain decentralization, often that's not entirely the case, right? At times, there are ways to influence the network. We all have heard about that 51% attack. For example, when a single person or entity gains more than 50% of a blockchain's hashing power. Jason, can you explain for those in the audience trying to understand, and a lot more are understanding a little bit more these days, but still, to catch everybody up, why is true decentralization something that is what you're working on at Algorand and Algorand Foundation? And how exactly are you all trying to achieve that?
Yeah, so just to take a step back with the Algorand blockchain itself, designed by MIT professor, Turing Award winner, Professor Silva Micheli, he came on board to essentially solve what we know as the blockchain trilemma. And out of the tri, we have security, scalability, and decentralization. And I think the area of focus that you talk about is decentralization. And it's a very important piece because that's what makes it uniquely capable of really delivering the global promise of blockchain technology. And why is decentralization so important? I think one word, intermediaries. And intermediaries have shaped our world. And that has really been the whole premise of Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Web 2, Web 1 being the focus of just a one-way function. Web 2 is where there are actually intermediaries that help us engage in the internet, as we know of. But in Web 3, we're removing that part of that through removing the intermediaries, and that results in a very high-level, simplistic way, decentralization. And Algorand serves to meet that purpose. We are on a path towards decentralization. In fact, even decentralizing our Algorand Foundation itself through our hallmark community governance program. And that's the most exciting piece about how us as an Algorand platform and also across the industry, many organizations are looking to sort of decentralize itself. So that's a bit high level of what decentralization is. Mm-hmm.
In a macro environment where we see centralized points of power, even politically or economically or financially, there are arbitrary, it feels like, centralized decisions that then are meted out for everybody else, whether you like it or not. Does decentralization overcome that? Is this the promise of a different set of structure? Is a different infrastructure that we potentially could all participate in?
Yep, I think the short answer is yes, but there's a little bit more complication to it with guardrails included, because decentralization enables the direct transfer of value. And I mean, a good example is with the Ukraine crisis, where, with this crisis, there are a lot of groups fundraising and activities happening. And I actually personally have a friend, a former colleague, who is in the Ukraine, and he just told me last night he just moved with his family to the western part of Ukraine, and I was able to transfer some digital assets over directly to him through a wallet, and that's all done on the blockchain network. And that is sort of a great example of the beauty of decentralization itself. Rather than going through an intermediary where there will be associated costs or we don't know exactly where the funds go, that's one example of it. And that's just exponentially put into multiple use cases where we may not know exactly how things are being formed or moved, except that it is decentralized and as well open and transparent. That makes decentralization unique here.
It absolutely is true. And when we think about, blockchain and the ecosystem that is being built out, once upon a time, we really thought it was going to be a one protocol to rule them all. Algorand and so many other protocols emerged to essentially debunk that thesis. Where do you see this multi-chain universe kind of leading all of us here?
Yeah, so I think, as they say, like when all roads lead to Rome, I think all roads lead towards a multi-chain future. And across beyond Algorand, other protocols are working towards it. In fact, in Algorand itself, we just really been working on new technology upgrades. So one of it is state proofs, which actually brings us into an interoperability future. Smart contract to contract calling, which actually allows us to again move away the intermediary, more decentralization, not within our network, but across networks as well. And we're also working with other chains. So for example, we just called out a grant for the EVM compatibility so that Algorand can work with the Ethereum virtual machine. And these are all really the building blocks and the scaffolding towards building a multi-chain future. And the way I see it, and our team sees it as well, is a bit like we are planet Algorand, and there are different planets, and we want to just build interplanetary communication and transport and infrastructure and growth throughout our economies.
But what is distinct about Algorand? What's the value proposition that is unlike Ethereum or Solana or Cardano, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Algorand is unique because it achieves transaction throughputs at the speed of traditional finance, but with immediate finality, near zero transaction costs on a 24/7 basis. So we haven't been any downtime since we launched in 2019. On top of that, we believe very strongly in sustainability. We're a carbon neutral, if not negative, platform. And we have a very unique proof of stake consensus mechanism developed by Professor Silva, of course, through his verifiable random functions, VRF, and this whole concept of pure proof of stake that really solves that blockchain trilemma. And that's what makes us unique. And on top of that, we also are really focused on not just building the blockchain promise in the enterprise or traditional sector, but we're really deep into the DeFi, NFT gaming space as well. So we try to capture across the gamut of things where it's almost like there's something for everyone in this creator borderless economy.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into contract calling. This is a fascinating new layer that allows, even within blockchains, to speak to each other in a way that creates efficiencies and removes perhaps even that third layer or even that needed interoperability layer that right now a lot of blockchains are interacting with each other. This is direct. Can you share a little bit more about this concept of contract calling and what it appears to be enormous for finance?
Yeah, so before contract to contract calling, it used to be contract to application calling, and that's essentially directly connecting with the application itself. Now, contract to contract calling would mean that a contract calling another contract in a type of like an inner transaction. And since it is a transaction initiated from inside a smart contract, as such, that contract would then be part of that same transaction group. So that means that all contracts are executed together or none of them are. So in essence, what it makes is it allows for a lot more faster, a lot more seamless function of things. Think of it as just life becoming much more smoother in place because it's not, contract to app, app to contract, but it's directly a connection between both parties through sort of like that inner transaction or that inner circle. So that's how contract to contract calling works. Now, in applying that to the world itself, there are examples like decentralized finance with exchanges where you can actually then have multiple transactions occur in a single time. And the same way for an NFT marketplace as well. If you were to, let's say, purchase an NFT that had a number of assets in place, and that contract to contract calling allows for all the transactions to take place and occur in a really seamless manner.
What I like about it is that it is really functional for the end user, that at the end of the day, I can, program my contract, and whoever meets the standards of whatever I put in place, which is the lowest best price or the lowest possible fee,
That's right.
I can my contract is smart enough to execute on that versus me, human. Maybe there's some FOMO or psychology at play. Oh, should I go with, maybe I should go with that. Like who's got the best deal? And then in that split second, you lose out on it. But contract to contract, it seems that if there is an ability for you to even just design your own algorithm and then have it execute directly with the other contract that meets whatever it is that you've designed or coded in, that's really incredible for finance.
That's right. And if you think of it in a real world where you need to sign multiple signatures over one document, or there's a whole process towards purchasing an asset like a property or a car or so on, like in the future where contract to calling contract takes place, like this bridges that where it becomes so seamless. There's no process where you need all your thumbprints and your signatures and all these additional pieces to actually move over to purchase an asset or to be sort of involved in a particular economy. It's very exciting technology.
Jason, I want to know more about that. I want to know more about what's happening in the Algorand ecosystem and the role that Asia is playing. So stick with us. Time for a quick breather. But when we return, we're going to talk more about whether decentralized projects can shake off the influence of their founding developers and the role of Asia in building a new ecosystem for the world. Stay with us. On the other side, how did the disappearance of Bitcoin's founder Satoshi impact the world's largest crypto?
Right, and now no one really talks about who is Satoshi anymore. But in the future, I do hope that it would be sort of almost like a faceless, nameless endeavor, but having also a really deep appreciation of those who have brought it here to what we can appreciate now.
And later, why are decentralized social media platforms relevant? When Word on the Block returns.
Forkast.News is your gateway to all things blockchain, breaking down and breaking through the noise with the people who know it best and why it matters. We go to where the action is, from Asia to the world. Forkast is the most reliable source of intellectual discourse and insight that informs, educates, and bridges the gap between the blockchain industry and the mainstream. The future is being built, and Forkast has it covered. This is Forkast.News.
Welcome back to Word on the Block. We are back in conversation with Jason Lee. He is COO of Algorand Foundation, and we are talking about so many things, including decentralization. And I want to pick back up on this concept, Jason, the impact of a single leader on decentralization. There's the theoretical, and then there's the real world. And case in point, Andre Cronje, the founder of Yearn Finance and perhaps one of the most influential DeFi leaders, very publicly quit the industry. And as a result, we've seen the Phantom protocols, TVL, tank massively, along with the Phantom and Yearn Finance tokens. And so back to decentralization and back to the impact of Cronje's announcement. How much can a single entity, a single event, impact investor confidence here?
Yeah, I understand. And I guess let me just take it back to just talk about three key attributes of decentralization or three of decentralized finance, right? The first is that the settlement is done on a trust minimized blockchain platform, meaning that it's the base layer, it's digital assets, and it's peer-to-peer. The second piece is that the services are non-custodial. So the element is that no one takes full ownership or control of custody over the investor's assets. You still hold on to it. And the third piece of decentralization is that the services are open, programmable, and composable. And that's where Kanye comes in and the team comes in, that where there are elements where you can add additional components to the blockchain network itself. And I guess that's one piece there where it's important, because for someone like him to decide to move on, he actually takes out a part of what he prefers. But the first two elements stays, the fact that the assets are non-custodial, meaning that the investors still hold the assets or the holders, and it's trust minimized, so meaning that you still can transact. So I believe Yen Finance Phantom have not seen like any specific loss in tokens, but probably a loss in confidence. And I think one thing that we don't usually talk about is the reputational element of a blockchain platform. I think we can have an amazing technology, but it is the people that are driving this technology that actually makes it count. So I think for him, that reputational aspect has led towards what's going. But without commenting too much into the project, I think one important part of the piece is the talent and the people that are behind this.
Staying on the topic of leaders, or rather leaderless protocols, Bitcoin, right? This is the first decentralized peer-to-peer network in the world. We don't even know if it's one person, if it's a team of people, if it's his or her name is really Satoshi, who this person or persons are. But, you know, the fact that Satoshi left the network, since then, Bitcoin has become the number one cryptocurrency. It seems to solidify the principles of decentralization. Do you think that, in fact, there needs to be removal of personification of projects, that the person or people who started in the first place actually do need to fall back into the background and let the technology speak for itself?
I completely agree, Angie. And I think that this is like an evolution. Like back in the early days, there was so much. I was there in 2016, 2017, when everyone was like, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And people claiming to be him or them or her, right? And now no one really talks about who is Satoshi anymore. Everyone has now been moved towards, hey, how is Bitcoin doing as a network itself? And I think it's great that we have a face and a name to the platform in the beginning, but really in the future, we shouldn't be talking about this, right? For example, in the early days, Henry Ford, when he started, really industrializing the car manufacturing space, right? Everyone was talking about Henry Ford, right? And said, oh, if you want, you asked me what we wanted, we would build faster horses, right? But he brought in the cars instead, right? And now no one really talks about Henry Ford, unless we study him as a case study, and we all just drive a car. So same way as well, we don't, we're not so preoccupied right now about like who Satoshi is, but they are important aspects, especially in this stage of our sort of the industry that we're in. So it's good to acknowledge the people who are founding it, but in the future, I do hope that it would be sort of almost like a faceless, nameless endeavor, but having also a really deep appreciation of those who have brought it here to what we can appreciate now.
Well, absolutely. I mean, people are what build technology. And speaking of which, also regions. The role of Asia, how do you regard Asia's role, the people, the region, and the ideas that are coming from Asia to build the ecosystem? How do you think about it at Algorand Foundation?
I think Asia is extremely crucial. I think Asia is a continent. I think there are about 4.5 billion people, more than half the world's population, a rising middle class, a really young economy, a whole group of nations that are really keen to sort of break different barriers, be it poverty, the gender ceiling, be it education and moving to the next level from a social mobility perspective. So I think we're seeing a lot of growth happening in Asia, and especially in this industry, it's not excluded as well. So for example, in the new innovations like NFT gaming, Metaverse, we're seeing really strong growth in Asia. And it's starting to be a really important hub for us right now, even at Algorand Foundation as well. There's going to be a lot of focus and attention in growth in Asia as a continent. And we're making sure that happens. Like We are hosting events, activity, infrastructure. And I guess if you put it from a traditional perspective, we are planning to have a lot of direct foreign investment into Asia itself. But in a sense, because we live in a global place, Algorand Foundation is actually incorporated in Asia, in Singapore itself. And we believe in the ability for a lot of good and a lot of value to come out of Asia because of this.
What exactly do you think is going to drive growth with blockchain adoption in Asia? What are the projects that we're seeing? You mentioned some of them, NFT, play to earn. This is all really exciting stuff for a very young, demographically driven region, trying to leapfrog into the future. But what are the projects that excite you right now as you view it at Algorand? What are you seeing coming out of Asia that excites you?
Yeah, so at Algorand itself, what's really interesting is a lot of what we're seeing is a lot of grassroots micro transaction based communities. So, for example, in the DeFi space in Asia Pacific, we're seeing Yuli, AlgoMint, PagFi, and these are all decentralized exchanges, bridges, and DeFi applications that work. In the NFT space, there is actually it's hard to say because everyone is working distributed right now. To say that they're based in Asia is something, but the users and the group as well.
It's very true.
That's right, but there's a lot of activity happening. So for example, and Opulus is a platform that looks into the music and entertainment industry. And I know the team here are working out of Singapore and across the world, but there's also a lot of concentration of users in this space itself. In the gaming space as well, we're seeing a lot of mentioned microtransactions taking place. So not the big users that we see, but more decentralized users. And what the trend that we're seeing is that there are a lot of heavy activity from a digital asset ownership perspective in other parts of the world. But in Asia, there's the high value of numbers in small transactions. So even when we look into our internal dashboards, we're seeing a high amount of wallet growth and actually even monthly active wallets that are coming out of different parts of Asia.
That's enormously fascinating, and it is reflective of a very large unbanked percentage of the world that exists in Asia. And it also speaks to the need in emerging and developing markets versus mature markets like the US and Europe, right? The systems are already in place. People already have their OS systems. They already have it figured out. But micro payments suggest that we're going to try to figure it out. And this is the technology that allows us to do it.
Yeah, that's right. I was just speaking in a panel at Barclays Bank in Singapore last week, and we were having another panelist guest that saying that he's developing a product that enables the payment of bills, day-to-day services, transport with digital assets. And that's happening in the Philippines and soon Indonesia and Malaysia. So you're seeing users that don't have a bank account, they don't have a digital wallet per se, but they do have a digital asset wallet through this platform to pay for their day-to-day services. So this is a form of financial inclusion, sustainability, and actually bring people upward in the economic cycle through the use of digital assets.
That is fascinating. All right, let's take a quick break. Hang on to that thought right there, Jason. When we return, we're going to dive into Algorand's partnership with Wavelength, this social media concept in decentralization. I want to hear all about it and, of course, the future when it comes to Algorand and what it plans to build out with its ecosystem when we return. And up next, what does the future look like in Web 3.0 when Word on the Block returns?
Forkast.News is your gateway to all things blockchain, breaking down and breaking through the noise with the people who know it best and why it matters. The future is being built, and Forkast has it covered. This is Forkast.News.
Well, Web 3.0 has been such a loaded and widely used umbrella term that people often struggle to understand its true meaning. Welcome back to Word on the Block. We're going to figure out what that true meaning is and try to at least peel away some layers of the onion to get to truth of Web 3.0 and the impact and the opportunity. Jason Lee joins us again, COO of Algorand Foundation. What does Web 3.0 mean to you?
Web 3.0 means to me where you have direct interaction community to community rather than corporate to community, which is more of a organized corporate body in a highly in sort of in a high level. And Web3 to me means economic empowerment, individual freedom, and the ability to transact in a truly borderless economy.
And that borderless economy, those communities, more important than ever before. I mean, if you just take a look at all of not only the tensions that exist around the world, but even in our intimate day-to-day lives, where we're really questioning, our social media platforms. Are we the commodity? What have we given up in terms of privacy? All of those things. And I want to ask you about Wavelength here. This is a decentralized social media platform. What does that mean? That means nobody owns it, everybody owns it. What is this concept of a decentralized social media platform, of which there are several out there? Why do you think it's important to fund this project?
Yeah, so for some context, Wavelength is a grants recipient, and the key area is, as mentioned, social media in a decentralized way. And I think the biggest piece of this is actually the ownership of what you share on social media. And we all know that when it comes to social media, the real owners and access to all your content that you post online is by the people who are hosting the platform. But with an organization like Wavelength and the likes, they want to empower the ownership to the users, and then you can do what you want with your data, whether you prefer to keep it, publish it, and to some people, they want to sell it as well, they can do so. And that is sort of one unique piece of decentralization as we've been talking about. One part of it is the ownership of data.
That ownership of data should rest with us right now. If you migrate off of right now a centralized platform, you lose all of that data. You can't take it with you. What kind of economy does that create in future, you think?
Yeah, I think it creates an economy where every individual now is super empowered, and you have the ability to own and to dictate and to decide what you prefer to have, from fungible to non-fungible tokens, and to custody of your own assets, or if you prefer not to do it. So all of us will have more options right now. I mean, if you look back through evolution again, we see that there were fewer options in life in the future, as opposed to now where you have entertainment, you've got travel, you've got commerce, you can shop online and have things delivered to you. Your taste buds have grown compared to thousands of years ago. It will be the same thing for asset ownership, albeit in a digital manner.
Jason, I'm going to coin this phrase right now. We are creating an economy where the CEO is you. We are all the
CEO
CEOs.
is you. That's right.
That's
I
right.
agree.
We are the CEO of our own lives, and this is the promise of that technology, to own our own assets and be able to, economize off of that. It's a fascinating world. This was a fascinating conversation. And I'm going to welcome you back on the show anytime, because there's a lot more to discuss. But Jason, thank you so much for joining us at Word on the Block. It was great to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was a wonderful interview as well.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this latest episode of Word on the Block. I'm Angie Lau, Forkast Editor-in-Chief. Until the next time.